Hello, welcome to another edition of the Sigma Podcast where we're exploring the worlds of AI and RG and how they can help each other out. And to continue in this discussion, I'm pleased to have with me a colleague, Michele Magro, lawyer, formerly of the MGA, now running his own consultancy, advisory company. How are you, Michele?
Oh, good. Thanks, Trevor. Thank you, Sigma, for having me here. And it's a pleasure.
Thank you for accepting the invite. To jump in, we know you used to work at the MGA, and now you've moved on.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit of self-promotion, but what are you up to right now?
So I'm a lawyer in private practice, in mainly on gambling regulation, and that's what I do on a day-to-day basis. So I've worked in gambling regulation practically all my professional life. Spent 9 years with the public sector at the MGA, and then after with the MFSA. And yeah, that experience has been
I missed the step. You were at MFSA as well?
I was. Yeah.
Okay. And now you're out on your own. But you were also involved in esports, right? Or
yes.
you took a particular interest in esports?
Yes, that is more on the voluntary end. Right?
Voluntary end?
Yeah.
Okay. So you have 9 years public sector experience, of which I believe 5 or 6 at the MGA.
Well, no, 8 at the MGA.
8 at the MGA.
Yeah.
Okay. So 8 at the MGA, vast experience in the field. If I may ask on the subject, how do you see AI and RG, their relationship together? Do they work together? Don't they work together? Are they in conflict? Can one help the other?
I think AI nowadays is crucial for a significant amount of processes that we need to undertake as a responsible gambling operator, right? RG has evolved so much in the past several years, and operators not only are legally obliged, but also are ethically motivated to make sure to properly analyze the behavior of a customer.
Okay.
There are so many data points that you could take into account that to assess the risk level of a customer. That it's obvious that you need AI support. And in fact, for example, recently we had the Dutch Gambling Authority issue some guidance in this respect as to how you're expected to use AI, when you should and when you shouldn't use AI.
Could you please elaborate on that for the benefit of our viewers?
Sure. So
is that the KSA?
The KSA, yes. So the KSA notified its operators of some guidelines as to how AI can be used in a responsible way and in a manner that doesn't violate its own principles that require an RG expert to make an evaluation, for example. So there are situations where you can use AI. There are situations where you shouldn't use AI, right? And there's also questions around the AI Act that come into force, the EU AI Act, as to how decision making needs to be done. There's also GDPR that factors into it with automated decision making and so on.
Jeez.
So I think
you're opening so many different fronts right now.
AI and RG are it's crucial for us to have a framework that allows it to happen, but at the same time it needs to it needs to work responsibly and in a way that is compliant with a myriad of different rules.
I'm smiling because on that chair, literally 30 minutes ago, we had the author of the framework at an EU level. It's a voluntary framework on the markers of harm.
Yeah.
And you're actually echoing her to a certain extent. How important do you see that initiative taken at an EU level through the initiative by the GBA and spearheaded by our very own Maltese, Maris Catania?
I think it's extremely important. I think the fragmentation of laws throughout Europe creates a lot of friction for operators. We often say Malta is a jurisdiction of primary establishment, and that is indeed the case. But then you have the challenge that you need to comply with Maltese law, with Dutch law, with German law, with Swedish law, with British law, and so on and so forth. And quite a few times, these laws contradict each other, even in terms of the data points that you're required to assess for RG purposes.
So So you believe this initiative, albeit voluntary, is an important step forward?
It's an extremely important step forward. We hope that regulators and legislators look into it as when they're, analyzing their own regulatory systems, because we've had similar initiatives that were done at EU level. For example, there's a technical standards, a sense and technical standard,
SEN, right?
Yeah. That unfortunately, wasn't particularly taken up it was taken up at EU level, but then it's up to the member states
didn't implement it.
So the fact that there isn't even an EU expert group for gambling services, as there was in the past at European Commission level, reduces dialogue between regulators and between legislators. So we hope that this dialogue is reinitiated either through GREF or through IAGRA or through one of the other international bodies. So there is at least a bit of understanding between different regulators and look into convergence, because as operators, the challenge that we have is that we do need to comply with so many different technical standards, including the markers of harm that we need to be looking into. Because yes, every country is looking at different markers of harm.
Two follow-up questions. So let's start with the last one. You described markers of harm as a technical standard.
Yeah.
May I ask why?
So your system, the way you design your back office, your let's call it a compliance framework, right?
Okay.
It is a technical system. It's a technical system with bells and whistles that need to detect when players take certain actions, when players are displaying a particular level of risk. So let's say, for example, quite a few countries require there to be a system where if a player is playing too much at night, after hours, then that is a potential marker of harm. If a player is chasing losses, so, he deposits money, he loses it, and then he redeposits immediately afterwards, that is potentially another chasing losses, So all of that needs to be inbuilt into your system. It is an IT specification. It is an IT system. So it is a technical standard, in my view.
Okay. And I actually told Mars this. I told her, do you think that in an unofficial manner, you re-engaged an experts group? And at the time, she almost didn't realize it, but yes, she had, because she brought together 27 member states with the technical people and the regulators. So hopefully this is the groundwork to move forward.
It is. If SEN is involved, the way it works is that actually an involvement at consumer authority level is also done. So there is convergence there, and it is indeed a replacement. Back in the day, I was also quite heavily involved in GREF, the Gambling Regulators
the Gaming Regulators European Forum.
And that has always been a pretty good standard.
But that's wider. It's more European rather than EU.
Yes, correct.
And you also have the British jurisdictions over there, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So Alderney, Guernsey, Isle of Man, Jersey.
But why not? Online gambling
is the sharing of experiences.
Yeah.
Is the sharing of experiences.
Especially the UK, which is one of the most, if not the most experienced regulator when it comes to online gambling regulation
or gambling in general. You mentioned the English, the British as being, and from my point of view, I actually think that also the Italians are quite experienced because, well,
indeed,
they are a nation. They do like to gamble.
Yeah, and it's one of the oldest, online gambling regulations in Europe.
Yes, it was one of the first, if I remember correct, 2009, after Placanican, the famous Placanican Gambelli.
Yeah.
So let's go back to our discussion. There is a value in using technology. There's a value in using AI, but technology varies according to how much you invest in it.
Yeah.
So, do you think there is the risk that actually the gap that exists between one form of regulation and another, usually due to the means, the wealth that there is associated with one regulator and maybe a little less, that gap will widen, and you'll come to a reality where, unless we actually take initiatives like we're seeing at an EU level with markers of harm, if we carry on going down this route, there's actually going to be a huge discrepancy in the value of regulation in different member states.
I believe there is already a very big gap between different regulatory regimes in Europe.
You just don't put out a statement like that without quantifying it.
Yeah, and
without giving member state examples.
No. So in fact, there are some member states with extremely strict RG requirements. There are member states where the law still has not developed enough to specify what these RG requirements should be. So there is already a very wide gap, and AI and technology and regulators that require operators to implement technology, or regulators that design law that informally mandates there that you need to have technological tools in place to be able to monitor your markers of harm. That is indeed a game changer.
Okay, so it's a matter of investing in the right infrastructure, and then where these gaps are created, you have one way or another a form of intervention in order to close those gaps. Now, you said you have two extremes. You have a very wide gap.
Yeah.
Maybe we have two extremes as well, even though we have a wide gap, that there are some member states who maybe take it too far and some member states who don't take enough. Without mentioning names always.
I think with the way gambling is developing and online gambling is developing, there is a risk that certain countries may over-regulate, not because for over-regulating, for the sake of over-regulation, but more for the sake that preventing the black market has not really worked in most countries, right? Mm-hmm. So you're still having regulated operators with extremely strict requirements, with very high taxes that they need to comply with, still competing with the black market, and
there isn't a level playing field.
There isn't a level playing field, and the black market is growing.
That is something I have a feeling. The feeling I get nowadays is that yes, there still is. I mean, we were discussing this, Michele, back in 2010. I actually believe that in 2015, 2016, an initiative, or a bit later, an initiative had been undertaken by Martin Lichka on the size of the black market in the UK. And it would be interesting to compare the results from then with now. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's happened, but the feeling I get, feet on the ground, is the black market is growing.
Yeah.
Now, is enough being done to tackle the black market? And in a way, this is also responsible gaming. Because
It is. I think quite a few regulators are trying their best to tackle the black market. But unfortunately, it has become more complex than ever. You have, a lot of regulators have managed to convince, for example, entities like intermediaries like Google, Meta, and so on from blocking advertising. Mm-hmm. They know how to speak to the banks and prevent transactions from the banks.
Yes,
But then you have the advent of crypto. Then you have the advent of, look at how most of the black market operators are advertising today.
Because black market at the time, in our time, let's say when you were in the regulator and I was a regulator mm-hmm. for a period of time. At the time, you could control the black market by controlling the flow of the money.
Yeah.
But now that doesn't exist with crypto anymore.
Yeah. It's not just crypto, though. I think it's also the way you advertise.
In what sense?
So digital advertising, maybe a few years back, there was a lot of influence from digital platforms. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, some digital platforms are a bit stricter than others. So you would have someone like Google, forcing you to show licenses before you're allowed to advertise. But the black market always finds ways how to bypass that. So, for example, you see a lot of black market ads embedded into either streams or videos and so on. And there's a very big risk towards kids there because, it's mostly, kids who are looking at certain social media platforms that maybe are a bit looser with these restrictions than others.
Even influencers especially.
Yes. So is that the marketing, the reality of marketing around the world has also changed, and it has become extremely difficult for regulators to catch up to that.
Could AI assist regulators in catching up with that?
Yeah,
How?
Well, that's a question for the regulators, but
You were a regulator.
I
Michele,
think-
you're not getting out of this one.
I think,
How would you do? How would you do it?
I think there are a lot of programs that could be done to troll sites and social media platforms, and also engaging with the social media platforms to increase their monitoring to prevent that from happening, right?
Okay.
And most of the time, social media platforms are interested in making sure that their platforms are not used for those purposes. So it's a question of engaging. The regulators need to engage. Now, however, the problem lies, how are 27 member states going to engage with Meta? There's going to be different
Realities.
powers and responsibilities. So that's where kind of, a certain level of cooperation between regulators, something like the European Commission Expert Group could have done, to engage a discussion at that level.
You've really led on to the next topic I wanted to discuss in AI and RG, because you said engage. So when you're engaging with a regulator, to a certain extent, you're raising awareness.
Mm-hmm.
You're pushing forward an educational program. So we've spoken about raising awareness with regulators. What about the knowledge of the player in general?
Yeah.
Now, again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but Maris previously said that the younger generation are actually much more well-versed in identifying, for example, deep fake or fake reviews, fake content. But it's not just the younger generation which is playing these games.
Yeah.
So how do you use education and awareness?
I think education and awareness has to tackle different demographics based on what we're looking at, right? So maybe for older generations, it's a different approach. For younger generations, although they might be more savvy to detect deepfakes and so on, there are still a huge amount of risks, because it's the younger generations that are watching all of the influencers gamble massive amounts of money away. So there are different approaches. One thing, for example, that I think needs to be done more often is engagement with parents, right? Because it's the parents. I've had casual conversations where a parent, casually said that he allows his underage son to use his betting account. That comes from the parents themselves to realize that certain things shouldn't be done, and so if you allow a kid to engage in certain activities, that is going to cause potential long-term harm. Engagement with parents, giving parents both awareness and education that
And what about engaging at schools? Are there such initiatives?
There are such initiatives also in Malta, especially through the Responsible Gambling Foundation and so on. So there is a level of education done in schools. But listen, this is kids. Kids do the opposite of what you're told.
Yeah.
So it's extremely important for there to be education in schools, but education at parental level is probably even more important, I would say.
In your experience at the MGA, when it came to responsible gaming, in your time, do you think such initiatives actually improved the situation locally? Because now the MGA does regulate mainly licenses which operate in or from Malta, but are not actually targeting Malta. But the initiatives taken for Maltese citizens themselves, or was it just Responsible Gaming Foundation which was responsible for this?
No, I think the MGA and the RGF worked a lot hand in hand, both during my day and nowadays, right? So I think there's a lot of collaboration on that front, especially on, for example, a lot of RG studies that they did for the Maltese population.
Okay.
So that's something that, for example, hadn't been done for quite some time. So they profiled
The Maltese player,
right?
Any interesting facts that came out from these studies, if you could share with us?
Yeah. Well, it's been a while since I've looked at those, but for example, we could see that a significant portion of the expat community in areas of maybe low income were particularly exposed to problem gambling, or through a proportionally higher bet per capita, especially in certain southern harbor areas, and that creates concern that yes, gambling is impacting certain demographics more than others. So there's a lot of information there that can be used on a policy level to deal with the situation. But yes, we had our first, the RGF did the first national campaign to prevent gambling. They launched a national helpline. They coordinate a lot with other national stakeholders that prevent and assist with tackling addiction issues.
Okay.
So I think a lot has been done over the past several years. There's always room for improvement. There's no amount of resources that can solve the problem, because it's always going to be a problem. But I think we're stepping in the right direction.
Michele, got the last few minutes. If you could set the top three priorities in your view for player protection improvement, what would they be? And I believe the player needs to be at the heart of all of this, but any other stakeholder?
Well, I think not just the player, but also it's extremely important for the regulator. But the player on his own, what about his social circles, right? And that's why I mentioned parents when it comes to minors, because minors are the individuals that are most at risk.
Okay.
The regulator at the level that, the advancements in marketing and crypto and all of these things, the regulator needs to be completely on top of these developments, because they do impact the black market. And we're saying that the black market is rising. And that is a massive challenge for operators, because the regulator is telling the regulated operators to increase and invest more in RG, but regulated operators are losing their business to the unregulated operators.
Yeah.
So that presents, I think, a very significant challenge that, operators need to up their game by, implementing these markers of harm. Regulators need to up their game by tackling the black market a lot more strictly and a lot more severely, and to look into nooks and crannies that they're not normally looking at. The black market is not going to advertise with a billboard, right?
The black market is out there advertising on your social media.
Yeah, and
in ways we are not even aware of.
No, yeah. So and ultimately, I think I would say that a high priority is educating parents, because that, I think sometimes we look at educating kids and maybe mass market campaigns, but what about parents? Do the parents know what their kids are doing on their phones, especially with so many young kids having phones of their own? Yeah.
Michele, thank you so much for being with us today. I thank you, the audience of Sigma World, for being with us as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe the Sigma page, Sigma World page, in order also for you to be kept up to date with the latest developments on our YouTube channel. Thank you once again, Michele. Thank you very much.